Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm your host, Douglas Gabriel. I'm here with Michael McKibben today. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Douglas.
We're going to do a show today on Kamala Harris. She's running for president, in case you don't know. She's from the Demon Rat Party. I like to call the Democrat Party the Demon Rat Party, and there's many good reasons I call it that. But she actually makes me upset. The reason is she has the same trainer, the same exact trainer as AOC and Barack Obama. Tilt your head back, always extend your hand out like a Heil Hitler symbol, always culturally appropriate everything, always say that brown and black people are what it's really all about, and just mix them all together no matter what race they are, no matter what country they are. Mix up racism with nationalism, mix up racism with theocracy, mix up racism with everything until pretty soon you're calling Pelosi racist, which she is. She's racist. She doesn't like American citizens, but that's not a race. She hates Americans. That's why she believes in open borders. But they have the same trainer. They speak the same words. They say the same thing. They do the same cultural appropriation, which she beat up on Biden because he was a segregationist and insinuates he's a white supremacist. She herself, we now have found, because we already did some research on this, and then tell them what happened, Michael. How is it that you got involved?
Well, we kept getting notes from various researchers around the planet saying you need to pay attention to Kamala Harris's background, and especially from the UK. Because as we know from her bio, she has a Jamaican heritage, and Jamaica, back in the day, was a British colony. And so, even though this is off topic for us, we put our researchers on this subject, and the research exploded once we discovered her family background in Jamaica was firmly rooted in the slave trade that was managed out of Jamaica.
And specifically, you had British miners, researchers, pull up and get a copy from Britain, I believe it was, of her birth certificate, which clearly states her father says he's Jamaican, her mother says she's Indian, from India, and that they were
she's Caucasian Indian.
Yeah, and that she's Caucasian. So basically, she's not black, and so the African slave cultural appropriation that then she tried to use against Joe Biden and others, and used the whole time all the way to climb the ladder to be the Attorney General, and her boyfriend Willie Brown. There was no time that she ever ran for office that she wasn't in an affair with a married man, or with a man. She was 29 and he was 60. All these bizarre relationships. Then she marries Douglas Emhoff, who is a white Jewish lawyer who everybody knows is corrupt. And she's involved. She had a $50,000 spent by the L.A. Police Department to guard her at the beginning of the election until they found out this was happening. So she literally has so much pull and power. She's already been chosen as the chosen one. That's the reason she acts as if the presidency is her entitlement, and that she can change her mind. She changes her mind on everything, whatever it is, doesn't matter, whatever topic. She lies. She's like a Pelosi. She's like an Adam Schiff. She's like Gavin Newsom. They're just California liars. It's just okay to lie out there. But what is really shocking, and it always upset me, first off, Barack Obama is not Kenyan, and Ann Dunham is not his mother. At least one version shows that he could seriously be Indonesian, and another version shows that he may be from Thailand and then moved to Indonesia. But the point is, he's not American. He couldn't qualify for being the president, and it took the Supreme Court to obfuscate the whole thing, to lie, to cheat. We know that the live birth certificate that Obama had that's given 1 year after birth. On and on and on. The proof is there. Same thing with Kamala. It made me mad to think that she's running for president when she is not qualified. Larry Klayman has already come out and said no matter what, her parents weren't here for 5 years. They were both students. They were both on a student visa, and she was born here. That's an anchor baby. Anchor babies aren't legal. So she's not natural born. She ain't a citizen. She ain't nothing. She's a California cheap political hack, a lawyer who basically sexed her way all the way to the top. Let's just call it that. And still, at this point, is married to a very crooked a Jewish lawyer, as I pointed out. But her great granddaddy was 100% Irish. Okay, and if she won't tell, and neither will her father, or show any pictures of who his parents were. But we do know that they all claim that that's her granddaddy, Hamilton Brown, and that the town was named after him in Jamaica in Ann's parish, and that he had 4 or 5 different plantations. He had all these slaves, but he was also a lawyer, and he basically helped invent Irish slavery. In other words, here you have an Irishman enslaving the Irish, lying to them, telling them they're going to receive great wages, getting them in Jamaica, making sure they can't ever make enough money to stop being a tenant farmer, and then making sure that he also hired criminals. Anybody who was arrested was put into debtor's prison, and then they were sold as slaves. So Jamaica was a slave haven for the British. And Hamilton Brown, Kamala Harris's granddaddy, was one of the worst slave traders basically in the West, and they even created an organization to try to stop him. What was that one called, Michael?
You asked me too quick.
FOH.
Friends of Humanity.
Yeah.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Friends
FOH.
of Humanity in Ireland.
Yeah. To stop him. Tell him about that, about how it was that the James Ray ship became a slave ship, and he basically was right there when 50 to 60,000 slaves, he was shipping his own, but 50 to 60,000 slaves ended up in Jamaica.
Well, we have firm proof right now that Hamilton Brown had been a slaver, himself owned several hundred slaves, and as an attorney was managing the estates and the legal affairs of many other slaveholders, plantation holders, of thousands of slaves, maybe up to 4,000 or 5,000 slaves. And we see the records now, the legal records, that he actually received some slaves in payment for legal fees for his estate work, his executor work, his trust work with various slave owners. And the other thing that we see is that he was very unashamedly a proponent of slavery, and when the British Parliament abolished slavery in 1833, he vehemently opposed it, and in fact, he continued to hold slaves. And now these would be primarily African and Creole slaves for another 10 years. But in the process, he obviously saw the handwriting on the wall from the 1833 Act, and so he specifically hired ships that were sent to Ireland, his home country, to appeal to poor peasants who were suffering from the potato famine, and made them huge promises of medical care, of high wages, of a place to live, and good living conditions if they would get on his ship and come to Jamaica. And he would distribute flyers in the town, and he got probably at least 1,000 to 1,500 people to get on his ships and come to Jamaica. Well, what happened is very similar to what we see with this migration issue on the southern border. They were made all kinds of promises, so they came north, and now they're seeing that the promises being made are not exactly what they were told. But in the case of the Irish who came to Jamaica, they were greeted, and then they were put in different places, and then what happened over time as they fell into destitution. And once they fell into debt, many of them were thrown into debtor's prison and then had to work off their indebtedness. So they essentially became indebted slaves of Hamilton Brown and his cohorts. Brown was a assemblyman in the parish that he lived in, which was St. Anne's Parish, and he was also a very prominent attorney. And so he then obviously used the indebtedness, the debtor prison system, to get these Irish slaves to work on his plantations. He owned 4 plantations in addition to his attorney work and his political work. So this was a guy very dedicated to slavery, and he wrote about it, he talked about it, and we have yet to find a picture of him, but there are people who have contacted the Jamaican archives to try to find a picture of him. But we know for a fact that Kamala Harris is related to him because her father, who is an economics professor at Stanford, specifically wrote earlier this year that he is a descendant of Hamilton Brown through his father's side. And so we see there's little to nothing to justify any claim that she might have to having any African blood at all. Now, that's when you say that, when you're talking about Jamaica, you're talking about a country that over the colonial history had many people imported as slaves to work on the plantations, and some of the plantation holders, as in the U.S., had children with these people. So over time, a true Jamaican has developed. Not all, you can't really say there's one true Jamaican because it's a hodgepodge, a big mix of cultures from all over the world who came there during the slave migrations, the migration of slaves. Slaves didn't migrate there; they were brought there, or in the case of the Irish, were cajoled to come there under false promises. But clearly, the Hamilton Brown did not care who he enslaved, black, white, brown, yellow. He handled them all, and he obviously developed great wealth. And so that would be another question: where is that wealth, and how has Kamala inherited that? But I guess where this issue really is important is we hear a lot of this discussion of reparations these days, and it's specifically focused on Black Americans or African Americans and their alleged claims to reparations. And we see Kamala supporting that. But I don't think because she lives in a glass house, I don't think she should be throwing rocks, because it's clear that her heritage shows a direct enslavement of, I'm going to say conservatively, 5,000 people who were enslaved by her relatives. And so if she's going to talk about reparations, she better talk about reparations paid to the people in Jamaica and wherever else they've gone since the mid-1800s. And by the way, this all reached a peak about 20 years before the U.S. Civil War. So clearly Jamaica was a major hub of slavery in America.
And that's very little known. The Dutch were usually blamed with the slaves for the South, and the Dutch East India Company was very, very well known in bringing over Africans, enslaving them, tricking them also with all kinds of promises, bringing them to the South and telling them that, they'd be able to work their way into not being an indentured servant, but in fact free. Well, that's all a lie. And the British were doing it in Jamaica on a large scale. As a matter of fact, the very first slavery was right on the river in St. Anne's Parish. I think it's called the St. Anne's River. I actually know Jamaica very well. I've been there 3 times and traveled all over. I just love Jamaica and Jamaican people. But the original people, the Oceanoids, were literally enslaved right there in that parish first, and then the The Arawaks, those are the people who came there about 800 AD, and really there's nobody original there. You can't say there's an Aboriginal tribe or anything like that. So it doesn't matter. You said it exactly what I was going to say. He was a non-discriminatory slaver, and so was his son, and so was, hello, what are we going to say? Kamala's dad? Kamala's dad
family,
left
clearly.
there? Well, when we do reparations, we have to go back how many generations? So sorry, Kamala, we go back a couple generations and you're a slaver. You're going to owe more reparations than any of the rest of us.
Right. So my heritage on my father's side is from Ireland, and so it's very unlikely that they may have even been on those ships. I don't know.
I just think it's great that she's going to include all the Jamaicans in this reparation, and the Oceanoids and the Arawaks and the other ones that were, crucified, really, basically by Columbus and the Europeans who came there, and then the Jamaican people who are absolutely beautiful. Yeah, let's give them all reparations also, and let's go back at least 3 or 4 generations. Oh, well, that would include all the Irish. Let's remember, many Irish came to America under the auspices of being a house servant and became slaves. Let's remember that in New York City specifically.
It wasn't just Irish. There were other Northern Europe. Hamilton Brown specifically targeted replacing his African and Creole slaves with Northern Europeans. That was his strategy. And so there were at least 4 or 5 slave ships that were sent, and they actually were called slave ships when they moored in Ireland. He sent those ships specifically to collect Northern Europeans to replace his newly freed African and Creole slaves.
If you want to see this history, you can watch the Showtime show called Black Sails. They go into this in great detail, and they show that Hamilton Brown had mercenaries, and they were Scottish, British, and German mercenaries who were basically like sheriffs, made sure that all of the colonial assemblymen's plantations, that there was no uprisings, and anyone that was brought to these islands that had been captured by pirates, well, they were slaves. And these were slaves from all over the world. These pirates had brought them there and sold them there because they were a commodity. And the British government is as guilty as the Dutch East India Company with the British East India Company. And my contention is that the American Revolution was really a battle between those two, and that it's still going on to this very day. And we are still economic slaves because with an open border, and something you're not going to like hearing from me because I haven't talked about this for a while, 800,000 people come up missing a year in America, the majority of them from California. And the majority of them are African Americans or people who came across the border or people from other countries, and the majority of them are either women or children. And you say, wait, what are you talking about? There cannot be 800,000 people. This is a form of slavery, folks. And when they come across the border, they go into social services, don't they? And they try to keep track of them, and they all get lost, don't they? And then we can't find them. And where did they come in? California. And so they just walked into California and somehow mysteriously disappeared into what they call the interior of America. That is a lie. They are the homeless on the streets of California who periodically are cleared out, and even their things are taken, so that they literally have to leave their encampments without a single thing, their tent or anything else, their bike, nothing. Where do they go? And I keep asking this because nobody will answer this. If you want to go to the federal system, they'll say only a few people are reported missing. That's because you can't report somebody missing until after 48 hours. And then after 48 hours, they're usually called runaways. And usually they're from social service placements. They're from foster homes. They're from the detention camps. They are the people who were put in the FEMA camps after the campfire burnings, and they were burnings in California. 8,000 people came up missing. These were hardworking people with beautiful homes. They're all missing. Where are they? Well, Kamala Harris and her California thugs are the biggest human traffickers, second only to China.
Let me read you a record from the National Archives in the UK of a list of the slaves that Hamilton Brown owned, and this is his certification of the list. He says, I, Hamilton Brown, do swear that the above list and return, consisting of 2 sheets in a true, perfect, and complete list and return, to the best of my knowledge and belief in every particular therein mentioned, of all and every slave possessed by me as owner, considered as most permanently settled, worked and employed in the parish of St. Anne on the 28th day of June, 1817, without fraud, deceit, or evasion, so help me God, sworn before me this 24th day of September 1817 by George Hamilton and J. Gordon. So that was the notary. And then it proceeds to give a list of the male and the female slaves, including the children of these slaves: Sam, Caesar, Quashie, Ned, Jack, Robert, Caesar. And for example, Caesar was a Negro, age 38. He was a Creole. They use Negro as the color. Creole, son of Celinda. London, Negro, 34, Creole. Cuffy, Negro, 32, Creole, son of Sarah. And then they have a separate list of the children under 10. And in this list, there are about almost 30 children under 10 that he claims as his property. So when you see the actual names of the slaves, it causes you pause, because it's easy to see these lists, and this list goes on for 9 pages. It's just like any other set of data. It's just data. But when you think about these are each human souls that he's claiming as his property, it's disgusting.
Child slave trader.
This is trafficking, human trafficking, and this is Kamala's heritage. She was born into it. Obviously, she didn't have anything to do with it, but she should not be throwing stones about slavery and about reparations with this kind of past.
At the very best, she's a pathetic California anchor baby. But she's not really that, because we know that her parents were never married. They never were citizens when they hadn't been here for 5 years, so they couldn't be citizens. They were on a student visa. We know that as an anchor baby at age 7, supposedly, kind of like Obama's story. I'd love to go into that sometime, but it's passé. Notice he's not saying much. But then she moves to Canada. She moves to Canada at least by age 7. Stays there until she comes back, and again, through entitlement and appropriations, demands her free college. I mean, really, this woman is a criminal, and her family's a criminal, and she's a lawyer, so that pretty much shows it. Look at her relationship with Willie Smith. Look at her relationship with the chief of police of L.A. It is horrible. And look at the people that are coming across their border that they want more of, that they say that you and I as taxpayers are going to pay for these illegal invaders. These invaders, we're going to pay full medical for them when citizens of America don't even have full medical because we have deductibles. But they don't have deductibles, and they're not doing the work. So let's remember first off that California can't run without migrant workers. Okay? So
why do we say that? Okay, I'm going to put my engineering hat on. Why would you ever make a general statement like that? Because you're talking about millions of people who are creative and can figure out ways to get things done. Why do we assume that we can't operate our own countries with the people we have here?
Well, basically because they use serotonin, a nerve gas, to put on any root vegetables, and throughout all vegetables, serotonin nerve gas, World War II nerve gas, is a legal pesticide. And it's used so that the migrant workers have to put on hazmat suits to actually work in the fields in some cases. And if they don't, they can die from exposure to this. And this is on our food. So we can't get Americans to go out there and expose themselves to serotonin. We can't, and remember, what we pay for already, I forget that if I gave you the totals, you would say I was lying, but it's just a little under $1 billion a year already we pay for the migrant workers basically having babies. because that's when they usually come to the hospital, right as they're having a baby. No prenatal care, no postnatal care. And then they go into our school systems. And then every school system in America must have full supplies to give any homeless person clothes, food, a place to stay, and everything else. Every school has become a social service unit, and especially in California, where in some cases they're speaking every language except English. So California is the biggest mess, and Gavin Newsom, Pelosi's nephew, and that type of Dianne Feinstein's husband owning Avid and ISIS management, the people in California are so overtly corrupt that when Kamala Harris came along, and now she's going to be on the Intelligence Committee, so she's going to carry on the California tradition of Dianne Feinstein, who was as corrupt as anybody could possibly be. She was right there. She helped create the dossier. She was the person begging for it, begging Christopher Steele to come over. There are letters between them, on and on and on. This is who she is. Kamala Harris is going to be Dianne Feinstein's replacement. And this is disgusting because she speaks as if she is entitled to be the president. She doesn't care what she says. Notice, absolutely no care about the lies that she says. She says whatever lie comes to the top of her mind. That is the same as Barack Obama. And she's using the same exact methods as George Soros has used to overwhelm 14 different countries. And he's trying to use on our southern border to overwhelm us. And California will probably tear down the wall after it's built, because Gavin Newsom went to the president of Mexico as soon as he was elected, as well as to the Northern Triangle, and got paid off in cash. That's the way that it works. Same thing for Pelosi. Her dad was a mob boss. So we are talking about basically a person who has culturally appropriated everything from white. Oh, how about her Indian only visa for what is it, 200,000 or some hundreds of thousands of people from India, specifically a racist gesture like nothing I've ever seen in my life. Kamala Harris put forth a bill and supported the bill to give visas only to high-tech Indian people. She also put forth a bill to make lynching illegal. Well, lynching's illegal because you kill people, but she did that because Jesse Smollett, her best friend, had to try to go after Trump in her last-ditch attempt. Remember, Kamala Harris was the one who lied. Her third lie about the person who, that Kavanaugh was supposedly assaulted was the worst of all the lies, worse than Booker's lies, worse than Feinstein's lies, worse than all the lies. The most pathetic lie of all was Kamala Harris's lie of the woman that she was given a letter from that said that Brett Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted her. That letter didn't last 15 minutes until proven to be false. I think even the lady who supposedly signed it came out and said it was false, as Kamala Harris was presenting it in the Congress. So you can't get any more corrupt than her, and she makes me really upset. So I thank you, and I thank the researchers who have found the proof that she and her family, and I say she because she's doing the same thing in California this very day, are slavers. And the worst of slavers, basically racist slavers who are happy to put any race into slavery.
That's the proof we found.
It's disgusting. And the way that she speaks has always upset me, because I can tell a liar a mile away because truth doesn't ring properly when they speak. Nothing she says rings properly. Look at her attack on Joe Biden. She was that child. No, she wasn't. And I sincerely doubt she ever took a bus in her little childhood life. It's just like Obama claiming he's from Kenya. It's just a joke that she claims that she's black. She absolutely is not black. And remember, after a few generations, if you were born to an Irishman in Jamaica, you are neither Irish nor black. You are Jamaican, and that ain't black. And that's what she is, and she's even worse mixed than that, because she's now mixed in Indian. She's mixed in her father, who won't tell the truth about his parents, okay? And you don't know really that her father's telling any truth.
You mentioned that he when he discusses his connection to Hamilton Brown, he skips over his parents and goes right to his great-grandparents, and then identifies with Hamilton Brown. So I'm sure Jamaica's not that big of a place, and so he had to talk about it because people would have been aware of it. So the question I have from a family viewpoint is, having been raised in Jamaica around all those stories of slaving and the moralities of slaving, the immorality of slaving, you wonder how much of those character traits rubs off on subsequent generations, and especially if you're continuing to financially benefit from those plantation estates.
Well,
I'm sure they just didn't stop.
Her father could not have not inherited what would have been, about 1/20th of the wealth of Jamaica, the British island of Jamaica, for heaven's sakes. No. And remember, he also was against abolition. This guy he hated stopping slavery, so therefore he carried it out on the Irish and anybody else, anyone, indebted people who went into debtor's prison, anything. And so what I'm going to point out here is that she has basically lied about everything. She lied about Jesse Smollett. She lied about Willie Smith. She lied about the chief of police of L.A. She lied about that L.A. Detachment that was protecting her. And when you look into anything about her, she lied about every single story has been so rewritten by her that you can't get one single speck of truth out of it. For instance, her guy, Douglas Emhoff, every story is going to tell you that they dated for a long time before they got married. 4 months. They went on a blind date. 4 months later, they were married. They're going to tell you that, that it was never proven that she had affairs every single time that she was running for office. And that's how she won those offices. How come that's hidden? Anything you want to look up with her, you're going to find these obfuscations, these professional jobs of going back and covering her tracks. Wikipedia, look at her Wikipedia entry. It changes every week based upon what she recently said. Oh my goodness. They have chosen her, I believe. She may be George Soros's special choice because you can't get any more corrupt than being a California politician, because you have to know the truth of what's going on unless you're out in like Tulare or like Nunes or, there's a few good people there. But in terms of the politics of that state, it has been in the pocket of socialists who have been controlled by Mexican payoffs through the cartels to keep an open border. Everybody knows that. That's like acting like you didn't know that Obrador, the new president of Mexico, got there because he supported the cartels. Okay, how stupid could you possibly be? He came out and those were the planks of his platform. He clearly stated that, and then his second point was that every Mexican has the right to cross that southern border, earn money in Mexico, and remit it back to Mexicans. He said that is a right of Mexicans. That's the insanity that Kamala Harris and the California Democrats have bought into.
Let me read you the diary of an Irishman who went to Jamaica, and this was in 1832. The same day I dined at St. Anne's Bay on board the vessel I arrived in company with several colonists, among whom was Mr. Hamilton Brown, representative for the parish of St. Anne in the Colonial Assembly. Some reference having been made to the new order in council. Now, that new order would have been the abolition of African and Creole slavery. I was rather startled to hear that gentleman swear by his maker that the order should never be adopted in Jamaica, nor would the planters of Jamaica, he said, permit the interference of the home government with their slaves in any shape. So that's how firmly he was against or for slavery.
Well, there were wars going on. The entire time that slavery was going on in Jamaica, from the original natives that were there were wars going on. And there's actually names for those people who were involved in those wars, and they had to, again and again, squelch them because no one is going to support slavery, especially the type of slavery that was going on there, where they literally tried to work you to death.
Wait, Douglas. No. Let me read you the next sentence.
Uh-oh.
A great deal was said by him, meaning Hamilton Brown, and others present about the happiness and comfort enjoyed by the slaves, and the many advantages possessed by them, of which the poor in England were destitute.
And he says England, I noticed.
You just don't get it.
Yeah, he says England, not Ireland. He doesn't say Germany or Scotland. He says England. In other words, he's saying that if you come and work yourself to death as an Irish slave, tenant, promise of being a tenant farmer, but you'll never make it because he's going to say that you have to do this much work, which equals this much money, but you didn't make it, so you actually go in the hole, and then if you give him any trouble because you're indebted, he puts you in prison, and then you come back as a slave, as a indebted prisoner in a slave situation. And that's how he gets these people.
In each parish.
Mm-hmm. So what he's really doing there is this is the biggest lie of all, because he works his slaves to death. And by the way, it clearly noted that Hamilton Brown loved his African American slaves and treated them nicely, but he treated the rest of the slaves worse than any slave has ever been treated in history. Matter of fact, they say that it looked as if he intended to kill them and to stop them from breeding, because he treated the children so bad that they often died. These were in some remarks that I read that I can't prove that. And you always like to have absolute proof. So what I'm stating is what the locals stated, because when you look up the church in Brownsville that was named after Hamilton Brown, you will not see anything good, nothing. You will not see one single positive thing said about him. But if you look at what the slaves said about him, they say horrible things about him. And so the fact that he's so obscured reminds me of the way that Kama means the delusion of the world, and it means the solution to the delusion of the world. It's an Indian name because her mother is Indian. And basically, I think her and her sister had better start saving up, because there are literally, how about the lawsuits brought against all the people who they know that he killed out in the field because he worked them to death? That's going to be more than reparations, Kamala. This is the worst form of slavery so close to America. Under British control, the Brits let him do this. He was a member of the Colonial Assembly, and all the plantation owners were protected by these 350 sheriffs, basically, who were mercenaries, the like of which only could make a pirate blush. Pirates didn't even mess with Jamaica because of these people, okay? So what we're dealing with is the worst slaver perhaps in history, because he wants to then justify it. That's the worst part of all, what you just read, that he believes that the people are out in the field happily singing and whistling and having a good time until they drop over dead from overwork. That must be what, the bliss of heaven coming? I don't understand. So this man had no morality whatsoever. The British government knew it. They were 100% involved in it. And as you know, historically, the English have not liked the Irish. And as a matter of fact, they have considered them to be kind of below them. And people don't understand that the Irish were brought to America, all over America, especially the East Coast, under the auspices that they were going to be servants. They were going to be domestic servants. And they turned into slaves, and then they ran away. It's just like the missing people of today that Kamala Harris in California encourages them, the homeless people, the homeless veterans, the people stolen from all these social service placements, the people who put in temporary FEMA camps, all come up missing. Hundreds of thousands of them, and no one cares. The federal government doesn't even have an agency to log these numbers, because they only treat missing persons if it goes across state borders. And so the FBI doesn't get involved in missing people. They don't even keep track of it. They're going to tell you there's only a few hundred this year. That's nonsense. And so when we look at Hamilton Brown's list of slaves, yes, they were assets to him. They were chattel. He dealt in them. Sometimes his legal fees were paid in slaves. Anything could have been paid in slaves in those days. Human life had absolutely no regard. Exactly as the homeless in California, the politicians have no regard whatsoever for the homeless or the people who the homeless are bringing diseases to in these major cities. These cities are almost always Democrat cities, right? They vote Democrat because so many illegal aliens are voting because they get a driver's license and they can.
So what you're saying is this is a slaver mentality we're seeing in these situations where we're allowing all these immigrants just to come in and fan out, and we don't know where they go, what they're doing. That's the way the slavers operated when they brought the Irish in, for sure.
Yeah, and eugenics. It's slavery leading to eugenics. But you pointed out this because you've delved so deeply into these stories. It seems as if some Irish came to Jamaica thinking they had some hope, and they would come because Hamilton Brown would bring them there, and then they'd leave. And what would happen to those people?
I haven't dug too deeply into the second generation of the people who came there yet. There are lots of records. That's the interesting thing about this. There's lots of records out there verifying all this many times over. And a lot of these are in the National Archives in the UK. So there's no speculation here. This all happened. And curiously, it happened within 20 years of the American Revolution, or American Civil War, when there was a lot of foment after the British had abolished slavery officially. But clearly they let their landowners and their plantation holders carry on until they figured out a way to replace them economically.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times they just cut deals with the former slaves and they kept working, or their conditions were so bad that they were forced to keep working in order not to fall into debtor's prison.
That's right. The
so
British,
very clever. You need an attorney to do that, and that's what Hamilton Brown was.
And
just like old Kamala
and her husband, and so many of these political hacks. And so, really, what is happening here is the people who went to Jamaica were freed, all of them, if they were slaves, in 1833 by the Brits. But Hamilton Brown continued for decades, fought abolition, and basically enslaved other people through legal trickery. And the Dutch gave up slavery as a nation in 1863, and America gave it up in 1865. But in between, Hamilton Brown wasn't going to let anything get in his way. He just kept on going. So remember, slavery is not just for black people. It's not just for Africans. Slavery has existed in every single... I can't think of a culture that didn't have slavery of some sort. So remember, I'm Irish. And so Kamala Harris is going to owe me some money. And Kamala, I'm going to give you my telephone number so you can pay me first, because you're going to owe so many Irish people, as well as black people, as well as Creole, which is any Westerner, any European who mixed with any of the Caribbean Islanders or anybody. That's a Creole. Well, you're going to owe all the Creoles. So, we are talking, Kamala, I hope you're ready with billions of dollars, because your daddy, your great-granddaddy, Hamilton Brown, was one of the worst slavers that I've ever heard of in my life. And the reparations, which I agree with you, they should be paid. By the way, or she'll change her mind within a week. Reparations should be paid, and we should start with the Irish, because they were the ones who were worked into eugenics. That was a pogrom. That was genocide. And that was Hamilton Brown's genocide that went underneath legal phrase slavery, which was already outlawed. So sorry, Kamala. There's nothing that you can do like you did to get, to become the Attorney General. There's no Willie Browns around. There's nobody that you can do your normal number on. Maybe you did it to George Soros, and that's the reason he's chosen you. But at this point, you need to start saving for your reparations, because you owe it worse than just about anybody I can think of.